The council spoke of extinction, but humans defined survival. Jake Morrison stood in the center of the massive chamber and felt very small. The room stretched so far in every direction that he could barely see the walls. Above him, somewhere in the darkness, was a ceiling he couldn't make out. Around him sat representatives from 200 different alien species, all gathered for one purpose: to judge humanity. Jake wore his military uniform, crisp and clean, with the insignia of Earth Command on his shoulder. He was 42 years old, a career officer who had spent 20 years serving his planet. Now he stood alone, representing every human being alive, and the weight of that responsibility pressed down on his shoulders like a physical thing. The first speaker was called the Zenth Prime. It looked like living crystal, its body refracting light into rainbow patterns that danced across the dark floor. When it spoke, Jake didn't hear words with his ears. Instead, the meaning appeared directly in his mind, translated by technology he didn't fully understand. "We have studied your species for 7 decades, the Zenth Prime said. In that time, you have spread to 47 star systems. You have established colonies on 63 worlds. You expand faster than any species we have ever observed. This concerns us greatly." Jake wanted to speak, to defend humanity, but protocol demanded he remain silent until all the accusations were presented. He clenched his jaw and listened. A creature that breathed methane and lived inside a protective suit spoke next. Its name was unpronounceable to human tongues, but Jake knew it as the Vraxian ambassador. "Your species does not know when to quit. We have reviewed your history. You have faced extinction events, climate disasters, wars that should have destroyed you, yet you persist. You rebuild, you adapt, you continue. This makes you unpredictable." More voices joined in, more species adding their concerns. Humans bred too quickly. Humans were too aggressive. Humans asked too many questions. Humans didn't respect the established order. On and on it went, a litany of fears and complaints, all boiling down to one simple truth. The galaxy was afraid of humanity. High above the chamber floor, in a viewing gallery carved into the wall, Lieutenant Amy Carson watched the proceedings with growing anger. She had served alongside Jake for 8 years. They had explored unknown systems together, made first contact with new species together, survived dangers together. She knew him better than almost anyone, and she could see the tension in his stance even from this distance. Amy was 35, sharp-minded and quick-tempered, though she had learned to control the latter through years of discipline. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and her hands gripped the railing in front of her hard enough that her knuckles turned white. She wanted to shout down at them, to tell them they were wrong, but she was only an observer. She had no voice here. Finally, after what felt like hours, the Zenth Prime spoke again. "Commander Morrison, you may now address the council." Jake took a slow breath and began. "You say we expand too quickly. You're right, we do. Earth is just one planet, and we outgrew it centuries ago. We had to spread out or face resource wars that would have torn our civilization apart. Expansion wasn't ambition. It was survival." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "You say we're unpredictable because we don't give up. That's also true. Our history taught us that surrender means death. The universe doesn't care about us. Earth didn't care if we lived or died. We survived ice ages, plagues, asteroid impacts, and our own worst impulses. We learned that the only way forward is to keep moving, keep adapting, keep trying." The Vraxian ambassador made a sound that the translator rendered as skeptical. "You prove our point. You are dangerous precisely because you cannot be stopped by normal means." "We're not dangerous," Jake said firmly. "We're persistent. There's a difference. We haven't attacked anyone. We haven't conquered any inhabited worlds. We've followed every law and treaty. We've contributed to galactic society. What exactly have we done wrong except exist in a way that makes you uncomfortable?" The chamber fell silent. Jake knew he had struck a nerve. The truth was that humanity hadn't actually broken any laws. They had simply grown too fast, too successfully, and now the established powers wanted to contain them before they became a threat. The Zenth Prime's crystalline form flickered. "The Council has reached its decision. Humanity will be quarantined to your home system. All colonies beyond the Sol system will be evacuated within 6 months. Your home system will be surrounded by an energy barrier. This barrier will prevent any travel in or out for a period of no less than 10,000 standard years." Amy felt her heart stop. 10,000 years. It was a death sentence dressed up as a safety measure. By the time the barrier fell naturally, human civilization would have either evolved into something unrecognizable or collapsed entirely. Jake's voice remained steady, though Amy could see his hands clench into fists. You're imprisoning billions of people who have done nothing wrong. This isn't justice. This is fear. This is survival, the Zenth Prime replied. Not yours, ours. The decision is final. Guards, tall beings in dark armor, moved forward to escort Jake from the chamber. As he walked toward the exit, his path took him close to the viewing gallery. He looked up just for a moment, and his eyes met Amy's. His lips barely moved, but she could read the words clearly. Get to the ship. Tell Lisa, Protocol Exodus. Amy's eyes widened. Protocol Exodus was something that had been discussed in secret meetings, a contingency plan that most officers thought was pure fantasy. It was never supposed to be used because it was theoretically impossible, but Jake wouldn't have mentioned it unless he believed it could work. She turned and moved quickly through the corridors of the Council station, heading for the docking bay where Earth's ships were berthed. Her mind raced with the implications. If Jake was serious about Protocol Exodus, then he had a plan. And if he had a plan, then maybe, just maybe, humanity had a chance. 3 weeks later, the barrier was complete. It surrounded the entire Sol system, a sphere of energy that shimmered faintly against the stars. The Council's engineers had outdone themselves. The barrier would block any physical matter from passing through. It would stop energy weapons, deflect asteroids, and prevent any form of faster-than-light travel. It was, by every measure known to galactic science, absolutely impenetrable. The Council representatives congratulated each other on a job well done. They had contained the human threat before it could grow into something truly dangerous. They had protected the galaxy from the unpredictable, unstoppable humans. They felt safe now. They felt secure. They had no idea that the real challenge was only just beginning, or that by trying to cage humanity, they had made a critical mistake. They had given humans something to overcome, and history had shown repeatedly that humanity thrived when faced with impossible odds. Inside the barrier, on a space station orbiting Earth's moon, Captain Lisa Grant received Amy's message and smiled grimly. She was a veteran commander with 30 years of experience, and she had helped design Protocol Exodus precisely for a scenario like this. She opened a secure channel to every human colony, every ship, every station in the Sol system. This is Captain Grant. The Council has declared war on our future. They think they've trapped us. They think they've won. Let's show them what humans do when someone tells us something is impossible. The response was immediate. Across the Sol system, humans got to work. 5 years had passed since the barrier went up, and Dr. Helen Park had spent nearly every waking hour of those 5 years studying it. She stood in the observation bay of Research Station Kepler, a facility that orbited just inside the barrier's edge, and watched the faint shimmer of energy that imprisoned her entire species. Helen was 38 years old, brilliant, and absolutely obsessed with solving impossible problems. Her black hair had started showing gray streaks from the stress and long hours, but she didn't care. She had a puzzle to solve, and puzzles were what she lived for. The readings are consistent with yesterday's data, said Peter Cole, her research assistant. He was 26, fresh out of graduate school when the barrier went up, and had dedicated his entire career to this one problem. He brought up holographic displays that showed the barrier's energy signature in complex mathematical patterns. Helen studied the displays with intense focus. The Council designed this barrier to be perfect. It blocks all known forms of matter. It stops energy in every spectrum we can generate. It prevents faster-than-light travel by disrupting the quantum fields that make it possible. By every conventional measure, it's unbeatable. But, Peter said, knowing there was always a but when Helen talked like this. But they had to make one exception. The barrier can't block gravity. If it did, it would collapse into a black hole and destroy everything in this system. Gravity has to pass through freely, which means gravitational waves can pass through. Peter's eyes lit up with understanding. And gravitational waves carry information. Exactly. The Council thinks they've cut us off completely, but they've left us a communication channel. It's incredibly difficult to use, requires massive amounts of energy to generate a signal strong enough to be detected, and the data transfer rate is painfully slow. But it exists. Helen pulled up another display, this one showing a timeline of their progress. We've been sending signals for the past 6 months, pulses, patterns, mathematical sequences. Anything that would stand out from background radiation. And 3 weeks ago we got a response. Peter leaned forward eagerly. From who? From the colony ships that made it out before the barrier closed. There were 17 ships carrying about 300,000 people total. They've been hiding, staying off the Council's sensors trying to survive, and now we're in contact with them. Elsewhere in the Sol system on the surface of Mars, Commander Ryan Mitchell supervised the construction of industrial facilities that covered hundreds of square kilometers of red desert. Mars had always been humanity's second home, but the quarantine had transformed it into an industrial powerhouse. Ryan was 45, built like a wrestler, with hands that were equally comfortable holding a weapon or a welding torch. He had started his career as a combat engineer and risen through the ranks by being exceptionally good at building things under impossible conditions. The quarantine was just another impossible condition. Production numbers look good, said Nicole Sanders, his chief engineer. She was 32, brilliant with machinery and had personally designed many of the automated systems that kept the factories running. We're manufacturing at rates that would have been impossible before the barrier. Ryan nodded, watching robotic systems assemble hull plating with precision that no human hand could match. The Council meant to strangle us economically. They thought cutting us off from galactic trade would force us to regress technologically. They didn't count on us adapting. We've had to, Nicole said. We can't import anything, so we had to learn to make everything ourselves. Food, medicine, technology, everything. It forced us to become completely self-sufficient. Ryan pulled up a holographic schematic that showed the specifications for what they were building. The parts being manufactured looked like components for spacecraft, but on a scale that suggested military vessels rather than civilian transports. Nicole studied the designs quietly. These aren't cargo ships. Officially, they're exploration vessels for after the barrier falls, Ryan said carefully. We're preparing for the future. And unofficially? Ryan met her eyes. Unofficially, we're preparing for any future, including the one where the Council decides that 10,000 years isn't long enough, and they need to deal with us more permanently. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. It's kept humanity alive this long. On Luna, Earth's moon, Captain Lisa Grant worked from a command center buried deep beneath the lunar surface. The facility had been built in secret during the early years of the quarantine, designed to survive anything short of the moon's complete destruction. Lisa was 53, weathered by decades of military service and had silver hair she kept cut short for practicality. She had commanded ships, stations, and entire battle groups during her career. Now she commanded something more important, humanity's survival plan. Status update, she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who expected immediate compliance. Commander Jake Morrison, who had been promoted to her second-in-command after the Council's judgment, highlighted various sections of a massive holographic tactical display. He had aged visibly in the 5 years since the barrier went up. New lines around his eyes and gray at his temples, but his mind remained sharp. Dr. Park's gravitational wave communication system is fully operational. We're in regular contact with all 17 colony ships outside the barrier. They're spread across the Perseus arm, staying mobile to avoid Council detection. How are they surviving? Lisa asked. Jake's expression darkened slightly. Barely. They're scavenging resources from uninhabited systems, recycling everything they can and rationing supplies carefully. But they're running out of options. 300,000 people need food, water, air, medicine. They can't sustain themselves indefinitely without support. We haven't abandoned them, Lisa said firmly. They sacrificed everything to maintain our presence outside the barrier. We will find a way to help them. Helen thinks she might have found that way, Jake said, pulling up a new section of data. Her team has been analyzing the barrier's structure at the quantum level. She believes she can create a temporary breach. Lisa's attention focused completely. Explain. The barrier is incredibly strong because its energy field is perfectly uniform. But that uniformity is also a potential weakness. If Helen can generate a disruption at exactly the right frequency, she can create what she calls destructive interference. The barrier's energy would cancel itself out, but only in a very small area and only for a fraction of a second. How small? Big enough for a single pilot craft, maybe. And how brief? Microseconds. Lisa was quiet for a long moment, processing the information. That's not much of an opening. It's more than we have now, Jake pointed out. One ship gets through, one message delivered to our people outside. Coordination becomes possible. We stop being completely isolated. The energy requirements? Enormous. Helen says we'd need to drain every fusion reactor on Mars for 3 straight days, and the power surge would be detectable. The Council would know we did something. Lisa smiled, a cold expression that Jake had learned to recognize over the years. It was the smile she got when she was planning something audacious. Then we'll need to make sure they're looking somewhere else when we do it, she said. Contact Captain Wright on the Endeavor. Tell him it's time to stop hiding. Tell him to make some noise. Jake grinned. He's going to love this. Outside the barrier, scattered across dozens of light years, 17 human colony ships received their orders. They had been ghosts for 5 years, invisible and silent, running from every Council patrol that came near. They had hidden in nebulae, in asteroid fields, in the spaces between stars where nobody looked. Now they were being asked to do the opposite. Now they were being asked to be seen. Captain Daniel Wright read the encrypted message on the bridge of the CSS Endeavor and felt his heart rate increase. He was 47, scarred from a dozen close calls over the past 5 years and tired of running. All hands, he broadcast to his crew of 15,000. Prepare for transmission. We're about to become very visible very quickly, and when the Council comes looking for us, we're going to lead them on the biggest chase in galactic history. His crew responded with enthusiasm. They were tired of hiding too. The pieces were moving into position. The plan was insane, dangerous, and relied on split-second timing across light years of distance. But it was a plan, and plans were something humans excelled at. The Council had built a perfect cage. Now humanity was going to show them that no cage was truly perfect, and that underestimating human ingenuity was always a mistake. 8 years had passed since the barrier went up, and the Galactic Council had largely forgotten about humanity. The quarterly reports showed the energy field remained stable and strong. Sensors detected no attempts at breach. The humans were safely contained, and the Council had moved on to other concerns, other species, other problems that demanded their attention. Ambassador Krell of the Vaxxer Communion stood before the Council Assembly and felt deeply uneasy. The Vaxxer were known throughout the galaxy for their strategic patience, for their ability to see patterns others missed. Krell had been watching the region of space near the human quarantine zone carefully, and what he saw troubled him. 3 of our mining operations have gone silent over the past 18 months, Krell reported, his insectoid mandibles clicking with agitation. No distress signals were received. No debris fields were found. The facilities simply stopped transmitting, and when we sent investigation teams, they found the stations completely stripped of valuable resources. The Zenth Prime's crystalline form flickered with what might have been dismissal. Space is large and dangerous. Pirates exist. Criminal organizations exist. This is not unusual. Perhaps not, Krell conceded. However, I find the pattern concerning. Each disappearance occurred near regions with high stellar interference, nebulae, stellar nurseries, areas where sensor effectiveness is reduced. The timing suggests coordination rather than random opportunism. The Vraxian ambassador shifted in its environmental suit. You suspect the quarantined humans somehow? I suspect nothing definitively. I merely report what I observe and allow the Council to draw its own conclusions. What Ambassador Krell didn't know, what the Council couldn't know, was that his suspicions were absolutely correct. Captain Daniel Wright commanded the CSS Endeavor, one of the 17 human ships stranded outside the barrier when it went up 8 years ago. His ship carried 15,000 souls, and keeping them alive required resources that the galaxy was unwilling to provide voluntarily. Daniel stood on the bridge of his ship, now hidden deep within the Carina Nebula, and studied the tactical display showing a Vaxxer mining freighter traveling along a predictable route. He was 49 now, his face weathered by stress and responsibility, his hair gone completely gray. 8 years of desperate survival had changed him from an explorer into something harder, something more pragmatic. Target analysis complete, announced Megan Ross from the tactical station. She was 34, sharp-eyed, and had become frighteningly good at identifying vulnerable targets. Minimal crew complement. Most operations are automated. 3 escort drones, but they're outdated models. Life signs? Daniel asked. 12 biological entities detected, all in the command section. Daniel nodded slowly. They had rules, protocols they followed religiously even when desperate. No unnecessary harm. No casualties if avoidable. They took only what they needed to survive. It wasn't piracy, he told himself. It was survival. Approach vector calculated, said Chris Martinez from the navigation station. He was Daniel's first officer, 38 years old, and had been with him since before the quarantine. We can disable their communications and engines before they can call for help. Execute, Daniel ordered. Non-lethal approach only. Disable board, acquire necessary supplies, depart. Standard procedure. The Endeavour moved through the nebula like a ghost, its stealth systems masking its presence until the last possible moment. The attack was surgical. Communications went down first, preventing any distress signal. Then the engines, leaving the mining ship adrift but intact. Finally, boarding teams moved in, taking food supplies, medical equipment, water recycling components, anything that would help 15,000 people survive a little longer. The Vaxxer crew was secured in their quarters, unharmed but restrained. Daniel personally made sure they had emergency supplies and that their life support would last until a council patrol found them in a few days. Sir, they're going to report this, Chris said as they prepared to depart. Eventually, the council will put the pattern together. Daniel smiled grimly. Let them. By the time they mobilize a response, we'll be 3 systems away, hiding in another nebula. The galaxy is vast, Chris. We've become very good at being invisible. Back in the Sol system, Dr. Helen Park made her breakthrough on a Tuesday afternoon, after 6 months of failed attempts. She sat in her laboratory on Research Station Kepler, staring at quantum field equations that finally made sense. I've done it, she said quietly, then louder. I've done it. Peter Cole rushed over from his workstation. The barrier breach? Yes. Look at these calculations. The barrier's energy field oscillates at a specific quantum frequency. If we can generate a counter-frequency with precise timing, we create destructive interference. The energies cancel each other out, but only in a tiny area and only for microseconds. Peter studied the equations, his mind racing through the implications. This is brilliant. How small is the opening? About 3 meters in diameter. Big enough for a small craft if the pilot is skilled and incredibly lucky. Duration? 3.7 microseconds. The pilot would need to be traveling at near light speed and hit the opening at exactly the right moment. Miss by even a nanosecond and they'll hit the barrier at full velocity. Peter whistled softly. That's asking a lot. It's asking everything, Helen agreed. But it's possible. That's more than we had yesterday. Within hours, Helen was presenting her findings to Captain Lisa Grant and Commander Jake Morrison in the Lunar Command Center. She laid out the mathematics, the energy requirements, the risks, and the narrow window of success. Lisa listened intently, her experienced mind already working through the tactical implications. You said you need to drain Mars Colony's power grid for 3 days? Yes. Every fusion reactor running at maximum output, channeled through the quantum resonance generators we've built. The power surge will be detectable across multiple star systems. The Council will know something happened. Then we need them looking somewhere else, Lisa said, turning to Jake. How fast can we implement the diversion plan? Jake pulled up communication logs. Captain Wright on the Endeavour has been standing by for months waiting for this. All 17 colony ships are ready. They can broadcast their positions and petition the Council for asylum within hours of receiving the order. Do it, Lisa commanded, and tell Wright to make it dramatic. I want every Council warship in 3 sectors focused on those ships. I want diplomatic channels flooded with arguments and debates. I want chaos. Lisa turned to Helen. Who pilots the ship through the breach? Before anyone could volunteer, Amy Carson stepped forward. She had been present at the meeting, now a full commander and one of Lisa's most trusted officers. I'll do it. I'm the best pilot we have, and I'm small enough that we can minimize the craft's mass. This is what I've been training for. Lisa studied her for a long moment. Amy was 39 now, hardened by 8 years of preparation for a mission that might never come. But she had been ready every single day. Approved, Lisa said. Helen, how long until you can be ready? 2 weeks to finalize the calculations and run simulations. Another week to charge the resonance generators. 3 weeks total. Then we move in 3 weeks. Jake, draft the message for the colony ships. Make it compelling enough that the Council can't ignore it. Helen, triple-check everything. Amy, work with Helen on the timing requirements. You'll have 1 chance to thread that needle. 1 chance to get through. The command center erupted into activity as people moved to execute their assignments. Lisa watched them work and felt a grim satisfaction. For 8 years they had prepared for this moment. For 8 years, they had refused to accept their imprisonment as permanent. The Council had spoken of humanity's extinction, had tried to contain them, had sought to limit their future. Now humanity would answer that verdict with action rather than words. In 3 weeks, the galaxy would learn that no barrier was truly permanent when humans decided it was time to break free. In 3 weeks, the Council would discover that their perfect cage had a flaw, and that flaw was about to be exploited by a species that had built its entire existence on refusing to accept that anything was impossible. The countdown began. The transmission reached every Council diplomatic channel simultaneously at exactly the same moment. Impossible to ignore and designed for maximum impact. Captain Daniel Wright's face appeared on screens across dozens of worlds, his image broadcast from the bridge of the CSS Endeavour, with 17 other ship captains visible in smaller windows around him. To the Galactic Council and all member species, Daniel began, his voice steady and clear. My name is Captain Daniel Wright of the Colonial Survey Ship Endeavour. I speak today on behalf of 300,000 human citizens currently living outside the quarantine zone, established around our home system 8 years ago. In the Council chamber, alarms began sounding immediately. Ambassador Krell felt his respiratory system seize as he pulled up tactical displays, showing the exact coordinates of all 17 human ships, broadcast openly for anyone to detect. Daniel continued his speech. For 8 years we have survived in exile. We have broken no galactic laws. We have attacked no one without provocation. We have simply existed, trying to stay alive in a galaxy that sentenced us to slow death by isolation. Today, we formally petition the Council for recognition as refugees under galactic law. We request asylum and the right to settle on uninhabited worlds. We are willing to submit to reasonable restrictions and monitoring. We ask only for the right to exist. The Zenth Prime's crystalline form flickered with agitation. This is a clear provocation. The humans were quarantined for the protection of all species. These survivors are remnants of that contained threat. They are 300,000 individuals, argued a delegate from the Threll Commonwealth, a species known for their commitment to legal principles. By galactic refugee law, they have rights if they have committed no crimes. They are humans, the Vraxian ambassador insisted. The entire species was judged too dangerous to remain free. As the Council erupted into heated debate, military channels across Council space lit up with emergency orders. Warships began changing course, converging on the broadcast coordinates. Daniel Wright had just painted targets on every human ship outside the barrier, and the Council's military response was immediate and overwhelming. What nobody noticed in the chaos was a small region of space near the Sol barrier, where sensor readings showed nothing unusual at. All inside that barrier, Dr. Helen Park stood in the control center of Research Station Kepler, her hands moving across holographic controls with practiced precision. Around her, dozens of technicians monitored systems that had been built and tested over 8 years of preparation. Power transfer from Mars colony confirmed, Peter Cole reported from his station. All fusion reactors at maximum output. Energy channeling through the resonance grid. Helen watched her displays as unimaginable amounts of energy flowed through the quantum generators they had built. The mathematics were beautiful, elegant, and terrifying in their precision. Everything had to be perfect, or Amy Carson would die when her ship hit the barrier at near-light speed. 90% power, Peter called out. 95. 100%. All systems nominal. Initiating quantum resonance, Helen said, her voice calm despite her racing heart. Targeting the barrier matrix now. The barrier around the Sol system flickered. For exactly 3.7 microseconds, a gap appeared in the energy field, no larger than 3 meters in diameter. It was barely a crack in the perfect cage, a momentary flaw in an otherwise flawless design. Through that gap, moving at precisely calculated velocity, shot a small courier ship stripped down to minimal mass. At the controls, Lieutenant Commander Amy Carson felt time stretch and compress around her. Her training took over, her reflexes operating at speeds that conscious thought couldn't match. She threaded the needle, passing through the gap with centimeters to spare on all sides. The barrier snapped closed behind her. The gap vanished. The energy field stabilized as though nothing had happened. Amy checked her instruments with shaking hands. She was through. She was outside. She was free. In her ship's computer banks resided every piece of critical information humanity had accumulated during 8 years of isolation. Manufacturing techniques, weapon designs, tactical analyses, locations of resources, communication protocols, and one very specific set of orders for Captain Daniel Wright and the colony ships. She engaged her quantum communicator, broadcasting on the encrypted frequency that Dr. Park had established through gravitational wave communication years ago. This is Carson, to all human vessels outside the barrier. Authorization code Exodus Alpha 7. The door is open. Repeat, the door is open. Protocol Exodus is now active. Instructions are being transmitted on this frequency. All ships acknowledge. Across the Perseus arm on 17 different vessels, communications officers received the transmission and felt hope surge through their crews for the first time in 8 years. On the bridge of the Endeavor, Captain Daniel Wright read Amy's transmission and allowed himself a smile. The Council warships were closing in, their weapons powered and ready. They expected him to run, to hide as he had done for 8 years. Instead, he opened a new channel to all 17 colony ships. All vessels, this is right. Change of plans. We're not running anymore. We're not hiding anymore. Activate full broadcasting protocols. Let's show the Council exactly where we are and exactly what 300,000 determined humans can accomplish when we stop pretending to be afraid. One by one, the colony ships lit up on every sensor in Council space. They weren't fleeing to the safety of nebulae or asteroid fields. They were broadcasting their positions openly, challenging the Council to make good on their threat. Megan Ross looked up from her tactical station. Sir, we have 37 Council warships inbound. They'll be in weapons range within the hour. Good, Daniel said calmly. Open a channel. Let me talk to whoever's commanding that fleet. Within minutes, he was speaking to Admiral Vorath of the Kryn hegemony, a military commander known for his efficiency and lack of mercy. This is Captain Wright of the human vessel Endeavor. I assume you've been ordered to capture or destroy us? Correct, Vorath replied. You have one opportunity to surrender peacefully. I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to decline. However, I want you to understand something. We're not pirates. We're not terrorists. We're refugees. 300,000 people who have committed no crimes except being born human. Whatever happens next, that's on the Council's conscience, not ours. Noble words from a ship thief, Vorath said coldly. Survival isn't noble, Daniel replied. It's necessary. We took what we needed to live. We harmed no one we didn't have to, and we're done apologizing for existing. He closed the channel and turned to his crew. All hands prepare for evasive maneuvers. Show them what 8 years of running has taught us about being hard to catch. The Endeavor and its sister ships began a dance through space that would become legendary in the years to come. They didn't have the firepower to fight a Council fleet directly, but they had speed, maneuverability, and 8 years of experience staying alive against impossible odds. They split up, scattered across multiple systems, used every trick they had learned about hiding and moving. The Council fleet was larger, better armed, and more numerous, but the humans were desperate, and desperation made them creative. While the galaxy watched the chase unfold, while diplomatic channels overflowed with arguments about refugee rights and security concerns, while military resources were pulled from across 3 sectors to deal with the human ships, nobody paid attention to the power surge that had occurred near the Sol barrier. Nobody noticed Amy Carson's small ship as it rendezvoused with one of the colony vessels. Nobody realized that humanity had just made its first successful breach of the supposedly impenetrable barrier. And nobody understood that the real message being sent wasn't Daniel Wright's petition for asylum. That was just theater, just distraction. The real message was simpler and more profound. Humanity was no longer completely contained, and the Council's perfect cage had been proven imperfect. Lisa Grant watched the chaos unfold from her command center beneath Luna's surface and smiled. The diversion had worked. The breach had succeeded. Phase 1 was complete. Now came the hard part, convincing the galaxy that humanity deserved a place among the stars, or taking that place by force if necessary. Either way, the Council had lost its absolute power over humanity's fate. The barrier still stood, but it was no longer quite so absolute, no longer quite so permanent. And that changed everything. The emergency council session lasted 3 weeks and became the most divisive gathering in galactic history. 200 species argued with unprecedented intensity about what to do with the humans who had proven that their supposedly perfect containment was anything but perfect ambassador. Krell stood before the assembly and felt vindicated in his earlier concerns. Though he took no pleasure in being right, the humans had done exactly what he had suspected they might. They had found a way to adapt, to survive, and to challenge the Council's absolute authority. "We must reinforce the barrier," the Vraxian ambassador insisted. "Its environmental suit venting methane in agitation. Double its strength, triple it. Ensure that no further breaches are possible." "With what resources?" Krell asked calmly. The energy requirements for the current barrier already strain the output of multiple industrial worlds. Reinforcing it would require the combined economic capacity of 20 advanced civilizations, working for 50 standard cycles. "Is that truly a reasonable allocation of resources?" The Zenth Prime's crystalline form flickered rapidly, a sign of deep agitation. "What alternative do you suggest?" "We cannot allow the humans to roam freely. The risk assessment remains unchanged." "The risk assessment was based on projections from 8 years ago," Krell replied. "Perhaps it is time to reassess. The humans outside the barrier have been monitored extensively during this crisis. They have taken resources, yes, but they have killed no one. They have hidden from us, but they have not attacked our civilian populations. They have survived, but they have not engaged in conquest. You defend them?" the Vraxian ambassador demanded. "I defend reality," Krell said firmly. "The reality is that we have contained humanity for 8 years. In that time, they have become completely self-sufficient. They have maintained a presence outside our quarantine. They have developed technologies in isolation that we do not fully understand, and they have proven that our barriers can be breached when they are sufficiently motivated. These are facts, not opinions." The debate continued for days, with factions forming around different positions. Some species wanted humanity completely eradicated. Others argued for maintaining the status quo. A smaller group suggested that perhaps humanity deserved a chance to prove they could coexist with galactic civilization. While the Council argued, the human colony ships continued their careful dance through space. Captain Daniel Wright had become something of a folk hero among certain species, particularly those on the fringes of Council space who had their own reasons to distrust the central authority. The chase had settled into a strange pattern. Council warships would locate a human vessel, move to intercept, and the humans would scatter like mercury, splitting into multiple trajectories that made pursuit costly and time-consuming. No shots had been fired. No actual combat had occurred. It was a game of cat and mouse, except the mice were proving remarkably difficult to catch. On the Endeavor, Daniel read reports from all 17 colony ships and felt cautiously optimistic for the first time in years. "The Threll Commonwealth has offered to open diplomatic channels," Chris Martinez reported. "Unofficial channels, but still. They're willing to discuss potential settlement rights on uninhabited worlds in their territory. The Markov Collective sent us navigational data for several systems with habitable planets that they have no claim to," Megan Ross added. "No strings attached. They just sent it." Daniel studied the information carefully. "Not everyone in the galaxy fears us. Some species see us as we actually are, survivors trying to make a place for ourselves." Inside the Soul Barrier, life had continued with renewed purpose. The successful breach had proven that escape was theoretically possible, but more importantly, it had given humanity hope. They were no longer completely isolated, no longer completely cut off from the rest of the galaxy. Dr. Helen Park worked on refining her barrier breach technology, making it more reliable, more repeatable. "We can't mount a mass evacuation," she told Captain Lisa Grant during one of their regular briefings. "The energy requirements are too high and each breach risks detection. But we can send small craft through periodically. Information, supplies, coordination. That's enough," Lisa said. "We don't need to evacuate Earth. We need to ensure our survival and maintain our presence outside. The colony ships are doing that. We just need to support them." Commander Jake Morrison brought new intelligence from outside the barrier. Amy Carson had successfully established regular communication with multiple colony ships and was serving as a liaison between the quarantined population and the external survivors. "The Council is divided," Jake reported. "Not all species agree with our containment. Some are actively sympathetic to our situation. If we play this correctly, we might be able to shift galactic opinion in our favor. We need to be patient, Lisa said. Let them argue. Let them debate. Every day that passes is another day we survive, another day we adapt, another day we prove that we're not going anywhere. 3 months after the breach, the Galactic Council issued its revised verdict. Humanity would remain under quarantine within the Sol system, but with significant modifications to the original sentence. Human vessels would be permitted to travel through Council space under specific restrictions and monitoring protocols. Human colonies on uninhabited worlds would be recognized as legitimate settlements, provided they submitted to regular inspections. Trade between humans and willing species would be permitted but regulated. It wasn't freedom, not by any measure, but it was survival, and it was recognition that humanity could not and would not simply disappear or submit quietly to extinction. Ambassador Krell presented the verdict personally, broadcasting to both the Sol system and the colony ships. The Council acknowledges that the situation has evolved beyond our initial projections. Humanity has proven resilient. While concerns about your species remain, we recognize that complete isolation is neither practical nor, perhaps, just. Lisa Grant received the verdict in her lunar command center and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before returning to work. They had won a battle, but not the war. Humanity's future remained uncertain, but at least they now had a future. 10 years after the barrier first went up, Dr. Helen Park stood in the same observation bay where she had spent countless hours studying the energy field. The barrier still glowed faintly, still surrounded the Sol system, still served as a reminder of the Council's fear. We could probably take it down completely now, Peter Cole said. He was 36 now, a full professor and one of the galaxy's leading experts on quantum barrier technology. You've proven we can create controlled breaches. With enough resources, we could collapse the entire structure. Helen shook her head. The Council needs the barrier. It makes them feel safe. It gives them the illusion of control over something they fear but don't fully understand. Captain Ryan Mitchell, visiting from Mars Colony, joined them at the viewport. Mars had become an industrial giant, manufacturing goods not just for Earth but for trade with sympathetic species outside the barrier. We need the barrier too, Ryan added. It protected us during our most vulnerable period. It gave us time to develop independently, to become truly self-sufficient. We learned lessons behind this barrier that we might never have learned otherwise. We learned we don't need the galaxy's permission to exist, Helen said quietly. No, Ryan agreed. We learned that we can survive without them. But that's different from thriving. The galaxy is vast. There's room for all of us, even species that occasionally need to be reminded of that fact. Outside the barrier, the human colony ships had established settlements on 17 different worlds. They traded with dozens of species. They contributed to galactic knowledge. They proved, day by day, that humanity could coexist with other civilizations. Captain Daniel Wright, now officially recognized as the diplomatic representative of the external human colonies, prepared his ship for another trade mission. The Endeavor had gone from hiding in nebulae to serving as humanity's ambassador to the wider galaxy. Course plotted for the Threll Commonwealth, Megan Ross announced. Take us out, Daniel ordered. As the Endeavor jumped to faster-than-light speed, Daniel reflected on everything that had changed. The Council had spoken of extinction. They had tried to cage humanity, to contain their growth, to limit their future. But humanity had defined survival on their own terms. Not through conquest, not through submission, but through persistence, adaptation, and an absolute refusal to accept that any obstacle was truly permanent. The barrier remained, but it no longer mattered. Humanity had found ways around it, through it, and despite it. They had earned their place among the stars not through permission but through determination, and in the end that made all the difference.